Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Megan Harrison, Executive Head of Transactional Banking at MomentumMetropolitan. MomentumMetropolitan are specialists in long and short-term insurance, asset management, savings, investments, healthcare administration, health risk management, employee benefits, and rewards programs. What a mouthful, Megan. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and yourself, Stacey. Thanks very much for having me.
Of course, I'm good, thanks. How was your long Easter weekend?
It was really great. I actually got the opportunity to go to Clarence, and it's such a reminder around how beautiful our country is. Yes. So it was very relaxing, which is always good to have a break.
Yeah, I feel like with the pandemic, we've gotten the chance or the nudge to really explore our own country. And South Africa is just, I think, one of the most beautiful countries out there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive right in. You have a very interesting journey. You've run a few businesses. You've built a few businesses. I'm really excited to just dive right in. Tell me all about how you got to where you are today, Megan.
Oh, Stacey, I don't think, my journey has been by design. I've never really been the type of person that was very clear in what I wanted to do. And I wasn't lucky enough to have, these specific skills that made it obvious where I was heading. So I think my journey has been an evolution, and it's really been down to exposure. And from that exposure, learning about what I like to do and, what I think I am good at. I think it's also to some part been driven by my personality. I like a challenge, and I'm an optimist by nature. So I always I always look for opportunities where, I feel challenged, and I, inherently believe that it can be done. So I'm happy to enter into an uncertain space. And also just really like doing things that interest me and where I learn and where I feel I'm kind of moving forward. So I suppose my most important first job was when I worked at ABSA. And I started out in, strategic projects. And it was there that I kind of figured out that I could make things happen. I had an ability to mobilize like a big system. And that was something I didn't know. And so, it was kind of quite rewarding to find out that I could do it. And then over time, I started to find that I enjoyed building out concepts. So not only did I want to make them happen, but I also wanted to, come to the party with some ideas, but also build on the ideas. And that got me into kind of the business building space, but also into the product space. And I really enjoyed that. And ABSA gave me lots of opportunities to, think about new products and take new products to market. And then the third thing I think I learned from ABSA was I really just found the business of banking interesting. Yeah. And I also liked the commercial aspect of the job. And so I liked, to drive the business and help the business make money, but also provide value to clients. And so that taught me that I really wanted to, be in charge of a business, and I wanted to build businesses, and I wanted to lead businesses. So that was quite instrumental, like in figuring out what I wanted to do. And then different, experiences at different companies added to that. So when I was at Discovery Vitality, I was really influenced by how they thought about things. So they've always been so bold in their ideas. And for them, it's really been about the headline. And if the headline is sufficiently compelling, then, everything that you do in the back end is to make that headline work. And that was such a deviation from, how ABSA thought about it, which was really you had an idea, and then by the time you got to market, it had become diluted. And so I really, through that experience, started to think about kind of the boldness of an idea, And I also was then exposed to, behavioral economics. And that's influenced me a lot in terms of thinking about product, but also thinking about the client experience. There's so many default behaviors that we as humans kind of fall into the trap of. And if you design and like through acknowledging those default behaviors, your opportunity for success does increase. And so that was, quite formative in terms of how I thought about product. I think, when I think back, the next company that really influenced me was SA Taxi. SA Taxi.
Such a change. How did you land up there?
So I had been at Investec building, a business that we called Investec Money, and things didn't go according to plan. So we were going to be launching a more retail offering, and they decided to kind of stop that initiative. And so I went to SA Taxi because I had got tired of a corporate. And SA
Gotcha.
Taxi was a small entrepreneurial organization whose founders were really still quite involved in the business. And I like the energy of kind of an entrepreneurial space.
Yeah.
It's very fast moving. You can do things quickly. And it's very rewarding in that way. And I think, the taxi business is actually a fascinating business in and of itself. And so it was like a new area which I hadn't been exposed to. And it really introduced the mass market to me. In ABSA and at Discovery, it was kind of the middle or the upper end of the market. But taxi really got me to understand better the mass market. But it was there where, I saw like really entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs at like close hand. And it kind of demystified the idea of an entrepreneur for me. And it kind of made me think that it would be possible for me to become an entrepreneur because it normalized it. And so, I got then the confidence of saying, okay, well, maybe I can build a business outside a corporate. And so SA Taxi, not only provided me with the idea, because I came up with the idea while I was there that, I then took and built a business around, but they also created the opportunity for me. So they were incredibly supportive and helped me in my efforts to kind of start my own business. And then, of course, moving out of a corporate and actually starting things from scratch yourself, it kind of confirms what you're good at, but it also really makes clear what you're not good at. And it highlights a lot of the things that you don't know. And so it's kind of like a crash course in learning a lot of things in a very short period of time. And obviously I'm at Momentum, so my business did not succeed. And so, like my next step was moving into Momentum, going back into corporate, but taking with me a lot of the stuff that I've learned. And I think that's really helped me, build the business that I'm currently looking after within MomentumMetropolitan.
Yeah, you have a lot of experience building new business concepts in the corporate world, which is capital intensive and the ability to access a lot of resources. How different was building a product on your own? You mentioned that you obviously learned a lot about yourself. It sounded like there were a lot of challenges maybe you didn't expect. What maybe would you have done differently and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, sure, so much. I think, the difference between setting up a business in a corporate and setting up a business outside a corporate is that within a corporate, generally the idea has originated from the corporate in some way or another. And they've often employed you. So they believe that maybe you can do it. When you are on your own, one of the biggest things that you need to do is access funding.
Yeah.
And through that journey, not only are you selling an idea, but you're also selling yourself. So, the people might think that the idea is great, but they might not think you are the right person to execute on it. Or they might think you're great, but not the idea. So you have to get kind of both happening at the same time. And it's very tricky. I think from an ideas perspective, what I also learned while I'm trying to access funding myself is that like the idea has to be a particular type of idea. It needs to fall within a range that it's sufficiently familiar to an investor that they can actually believe that it's going to be successful. So if your idea, sits too far outside of what is known, it becomes trickier to get that funding.
Yeah.
I think also what is important is the timing. Like when I started the business, I was using the SA Taxi network to create a platform that brought taxi commuters together with businesses. And the idea was compelling and people liked the idea. And at the beginning of the journey, I actually had a lot of interest. And I got, kind of funding at that particular point in time. I think as you, kind of go through the journey and you start deploying, if the success isn't immediate or if the response that you're expecting is not there or not in line with the investor, there's less appetite because investors don't really want to take the risk. They want something that is more sure and something where they're going to get their money back, which obviously makes sense. So it's at that phase where things become, pretty tricky. And that's where your business model really needs to be capital, poor. I don't know if that's the right word, instead of capital intensive.
Yeah.
Because you really have to find a way of being able to maintain your business while you are building sufficient evidence to demonstrate that it can be a successful business. And if it's so capital intensive, you just don't have the ability to then wait it out because either you are funding it and at some point your own funding comes to an end, or you have to get funding from elsewhere and, there's only at particular points will people, put money in. So the business model, like in a corporate, corporates will continue to invest. They're prepared to wait for a longer period of time. They've already invested. So it's like a sunk cost. So your ability to have a business model that generates cash flow and profit over a long period of time is more acceptable.
How could you have made the product idea cost less or be more possible to do with the funding that you had available?
So I had really, I think made one of the fundamental mistakes of really designing, the Rolls Royce. So
I love that analogy.
I had like a platform which, the taxi commuter could pretty much do a whole range of things. They could do research. They could watch adverts. They could buy content. They could buy data. They could buy airtime. They could get vouchers. And I landed it all at the same time. And to create that ecosystem was expensive. And so, if I had to reflect back and think about it, I would have taken a single idea out of those many. I would have then created the platform in a way that wasn't capital intensive. So what I did is I built two apps. I built an Android app and I also built a BlackBerry app. Now, this was 7 years ago. So BlackBerry was kind of the platform of choice, but it was a dying platform. And I really should have just used a web-based kind of mechanism to test the idea and then to see whether the device that we were putting in the taxis to almost create access, whether if we had just put it in one taxi and tested it with one idea to see the taxi commuters' response and businesses' response, it would have saved, a lot of time. It would have saved a lot of money.
And you could have elaborated on the idea as time went by, like with the one concept. If that was successful, then maybe integrate the second idea and then elaborate on that.
No, absolutely. And what I have found is what you think is going to be successful aren't the things that are successful.
Yes.
When you put something out there, it's the response that tells you where you need to go.
Exactly.
And because I took everything at the same time, I had run out of money to evolve it based on the response.
You couldn't pivot, you couldn't tweak, yeah.
Exactly. And then there was also, I had spent a really long time figuring out from the taxi commuter what they liked. So I did a lot of client insights. They played around with the app to make sure that it was user friendly. But there was one fundamental flaw in the process as well, which was like the downloading process. So the app, when the commuter got into using the app, was easy to navigate. But because we were downloading the app from a device in the taxi, there was an extra step that needed to be done. And that one extra step just created friction in the process for the taxi commuter that they just weren't prepared to navigate around it. And if I had known that one thing by actually having tested all of this in a taxi, before building everything, it would have forced me to look at a different way of allowing the taxi commuter to access the same platform, but one that was easy to navigate throughout the process and not just kind of once they were in that particular platform.
That makes sense. Start small and build from there. I think that's really, really great advice for many people who are out there trying to build a business. Starting small, starting with an idea, and then as time goes by, hearing how consumers or customers are reacting to that, and then tweaking it from there. So I think that's really, really great advice. But now you're at Momentum. You've set up a banking ecosystem. When you arrived, there was nothing. It didn't exist. And now over time, it's grown and it's at a stage where you can step back. How were you able to get to this place and really just see this ecosystem run on its own?
Yeah, Stacey, I'm not sure it's at the stage yet where I can step back, but
okay, we're getting there.
We're getting there. But what we have done is we have created an ecosystem where I think we are positioned to leverage, the strategic assets of Momentum Metropolitan in the delivery of products and new types of products, which help them kind of solve some of the problems or strategic ambitions that they have. And I think, thinking about it, there were a couple of things that I think have got us to this point. And I think the first thing is how we thought about setting up the ecosystem. So, I think that you have a purpose. There's something that you're trying to achieve. You have a business model in terms of how you're making money. And then you have kind of a set of capabilities that you need in order to get you there. I think what is very important in what we did is that when we architected the business, we did it with a view from kind of flexibility because we didn't always know how exactly we were going to get there and what we were going to face in our journey there. And that flexibility for us to add capabilities, remove capabilities, expand on capabilities or swap out capabilities has really allowed us over time to continue moving towards what we're trying to achieve, but taking into account the different things that we face along the way. So the setup of your architecture is really important when you're thinking about an ecosystem. I think the other thing that, you need to be very clear on, which I think we have been clear on, is what's core to us. Where do we need strategic partners and what can just be transactional?
Yeah.
And like when you figure out what's core to you, that is
how do you tell the difference?
Well, for us, core meant that we would always be able to reach our ambition no matter what changed around us because we controlled that as part of our destiny. It wasn't dependent on somewhere else. So I'll tell you the example that I'm mentioning is that in our effort to take banking products to market, we decided that the core account would sit within our own ecosystem. And so we wouldn't leverage the core accounts of someone else. So we had to set it up, manage it. We had to deal with the interfaces into that core account. And that allowed us to, because our proposition is based on a lot of integration, always control the prioritization, the speed, and the effectiveness of integration into that. But everything around it could be plug and play. So we could plug and play a card management system. We could do the same for digital payments. We could do the same for EFT bureaus. So we were then able to kind of determine or kind of hold on to what we thought we needed to be good at and what gave us a competitive advantage, but then look around for kind of the best strategic partner to help us with the other things that we could plug and play in. And then look at where we could outsource, where it's not necessarily a strategic partnership, but you're using someone else to deliver. So when you are creating an ecosystem, you really don't and shouldn't own everything, and you shouldn't have to have the capability to build everything. And I think lots of organizations like the idea of owning everything. And so, when you can move away from that as an idea and recognize that there are other parties there that are very good at certain things, which you will never be as good as. And if you are able to partner with them and you've got a similar way of doing business, you've got a similar way of thinking, it really adds immense value to what you are doing. So your strategic partnerships are really, really important. And, I think the one thing that I've also, kind of have appreciated more as we have been going through this journey is really how do you kind of get a win-win? So, your ecosystem is only ever going to be as successful as the success of everyone in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so that is also something that, it's not a win or lose. You have to find a way where as kind of businesses grow, both parties benefit equally. And I think from a corporate perspective, often, you get external people who want to do business with you and they will kind of discount their pricing to get in. But over time, it's just not sustainable. And so like as a corporate, you have to be very careful about that. But you need to make sure that that provider is actually going to make money. Because if they don't, it also impacts your business. And so, it's kind of a balance that you need to kind of have.
Definitely. There's so many elements that contribute to when you outsource. There's the time factor. It takes time to ramp up to the level an outsourced firm produces. There's the capital aspect where it can be cheaper. Then there's the obvious skill component. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the optimal way to build the ecosystem.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can't afford to do it all yourself. I mean, as you mentioned, and it just doesn't make sense.
And then the final question I have is related to the fact that throughout your career in FinTech, you've been in positions where women have been underserved. Either women haven't been in your positions previously or there haven't been many women around you. Did you feel supported by your peers in every stage along the way? And how did you navigate the challenges?
Yeah, I think, Stacey, at different times in your career, organizations respond to you differently as a female. And certainly in the beginning of my career, I felt very supported by my peers. Yeah. I think that, there were always a lot of microaggressions. You do the admin tasks and don't get listened to as much. But, you just assume that's part of being junior in that role. And so, not that conscious about it. But as you get kind of in a position of power, I think then the organization starts to respond differently to you because you're no longer acting on behalf of someone else who is generally a male, but you're now, are acting on your own behalf. And I think which is tricky is that often people don't consciously or unconsciously believe that females deserve to be in a position of power, but they've also got a very narrow frame of reference of what a female leader should be. And so it's quite hard to fit that description. And so I think what, people or female leaders battle with is getting labeled. So I think you often get labeled. You either, too aggressive or you are not assertive enough or, there's so many different things that you get named. And so you spend your time, kind of having to deal with the label kind of a lot. So that can be, kind of distracting. And then it can also lead to, one questioning yourself. Yeah. I suppose the positive from that is that, you do get a lot of feedback. And if you take what is true, does help you become a better leader. But there's certainly levels of feedback that your male counterpart does not receive to the same extent.
How do you weed out the noise?
I think that's quite hard. I think you have to know who you are, and you also have to be
self-aware.
Yeah, comfortable with who you are, So, and there's also something, my one boss told me this once and I loved it. She said, you're allowed to have an allowable weakness. We're not perfect. So, there are things about you that may be too much. And that's okay. Just be conscious of us and manage around it. So I think it's as you say, it's self-awareness, but don't try and be something that you're not. So be authentic, just try and get better every day, but you have a right to be there. You have a right to be who you are. And you need to believe that. And I think if you do all of those things, then you become settled, and then the noise becomes less, and you find it easier to navigate.
Awesome. Megan, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. I always love getting to chat to you. Where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
I think they can just go to LinkedIn and look up Megan Harrison. And if they're interested to understand what Momentum is doing, they can also go to and find out more about Multiply Money.
Awesome. Thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.